What's going on, folks? Welcome to another episode of Out of Right Field with JP. I'm your host, JP, and today we're going to be discussing the NCAA and its bureaucratic nonsense that it has going on right now. It's nothing new. It's just par for the course for the NCAA. But before we get into the video, I just ask for you guys to please like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. And then click the link in my bio to my personal X page and follow me there. I greatly appreciate that as well. So let's get into today's video. So just a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump signed an executive order banning transgender men from competing in women's sports. And you would think that this executive order would, fix the issue altogether. Well, this does require some compliance from organizations like the NCAA, state governments as well, and it's not been going as effective as it should. Because groups like the NCAA aren't complying. Or let me put it this way. They're pretending to be complying because the NCAA revised their transgender policy in regards to transgenders playing in women's sports. This is directly from the NCAA's website, by the way. So this referendum claims that the change in policy no longer allows transgenders to be competing in women's sports. And there's just one issue with that, though. It requires verification from birth certificates. 44 states in the U.S. allow people to change their birth certificates after, obviously after it's been made, but they can tweak it and put on their preferred identity instead of their quote assigned gender at birth. And as you can see in what I put up there from the NCAA, even they're still using the language assigned at birth, and objective biology does not exist to the NCAA. And they're claiming that whatever's on the birth certificate, we'll let it fly. But not only that, but this policy only prohibits future participation from transgenders in competition. They're still allowed to practice. They're still allowed access to all the facilities. So therefore, transgender men can still access women's bathrooms for practice and such. It's just, doesn't allow it in games, in competition. And even then, birth certificates are allowed to be modified in 44 states. Okay, liberal policymakers are fully aware of this. That's why they're using the birth certificates as the way of verification and not, cheek swabs to determine chromosomes and such. It's a joke. So this new quote policy from the NCAA does nothing, actually. They're just making it seem like they're doing something. I saw Charlie Baker said, now Donald Trump has made it perfectly clear, even if it wasn't perfectly clear already, that transgender men should not be participating in women's sports. But now we have this new policy. Everything is good. You guys can move on. We got our ducks in a line here. Move on along. We got to figure it out here over the NCAA. Well, y'all don't, because still, this is the for show policy. Let's say this is something to say that the NCAA did something to fix the transgender issue in women's sports, but it does nothing. So you're still going to have transgender men accessing women's bathrooms and participating in practice against other women, still, putting women in risk of getting harmed and getting injured and getting preyed upon. And the argument that, quote, there's not a lot of transgenders in women's sports nationwide, this isn't a big issue. It's only a small, minor issue, and Republicans are deciding to hone in on this thing that's not really a big deal and trying to further their political agenda. Well, even if that were the case, it's still far too many, however many there is. I saw Charlie Baker claim that there's only 10 transgenders participating in women's sports. Well, guess what? That's 10 too many. And if you open the door, then you're going to open up a full floodgates of potential issues going forward. I mean, we saw Iman Khalif, who ended up being a man, and everybody knew that he was a man, participating in women's sports and won the gold medal in women's boxing this past Olympics because the Olympics are going along with this woke ideology. So we had women who were getting battered, physically, literally battered, and forfeiting boxing matches that they trained their whole life for to get to that point because Iman Khalif pretended to be a girl and won the gold medal because of it. And everybody was attacked, claiming that, she had a condition. And it turns out he had a micro penis and he is a man. And yet he was allowed to box in the Olympics against other real women and physically hurt them. People die in boxing matches. People have died in boxing matches. And yet they allowed that man to walk into the ring and fight against real women and won the gold medal. Is a complete joke. So I just use that to illustrate this is not some fake problem, some fictional problem that Republicans are, going nuts over for no reason. This puts women at risk. And no matter how many, quote, men you think are playing in women's sports, if you think it's 5, you think it's 10, if you think it's none, it's not none. However many you think it is, that's still far too many. And that's that many women being put in danger and put in harm's way. So if the NCAA are too cowardly to do something to protect women, then somebody needs to get involved. And thank you for Tommy Tuberville, because it appears that Tommy Tuberville, the senator out of Alabama, his Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act will be going to the Senate floor today when this video is posted on March 3rd. And it will be voted upon. Not only does it amend Title IX, but it also prohibits any federal funding to go to athletic organizations that allow men to compete in women's sports. But it also defines sex as reproductive biology and genetics that are determined at birth. So this would put Donald Trump's executive order into law, and it would make it to where this can't be reversed the next time a Democrat president comes into office. So hopefully the NCAA will see that and see federal law is now in place and make some tweaks. But this is nothing new from the NCAA, okay? The bureaucratic nonsense from this organization has been par for the course, okay? You see how the NIL disaster has gotten completely out of hands with the NCAA. The NCAA saw that this was a possibility with the Supreme Court ruling, and yet they got behind the 8-ball. It's the Wild Wild West. They're waiting for the federal government to intervene. This is your organization. Why are you waiting for the federal government to intervene? I don't understand how they let the NIL nonsense get out of hand this badly. But not only that, but this could lead to the SEC, the Big Ten, to leave the NCAA, because if NIL becomes, so out of control, which it's pretty much there, the NCAA could be meaningless, because what does it do? All it does is get in the way of things. It, puts girls in harm's way because they won't have a spine and get out in front of this transgender issue and make some affirmative decision. Instead, they're saying we're complying with Trump's executive order. We're complying with federal law. And even though they're not. So this could lead to the SEC and the Big Ten say, look, what's the need of the NCAA? We already have college football. The playoffs are, determined from the college football playoff organization, and that is completely separate from the NCAA. So therefore, the NCAA is kind of meaningless in terms of, picking a champion for football. So what's the point? What's the point of the NCAA? They're just a bureaucracy that gets in the way. But this would also give the SEC and the Big Ten and potentially others, we see conference realignment become, a joke, honestly. But the SEC and the Big Ten are really the big two as of now. The ACC is still there, but it's kind of on its last leg too. So, we could see the SEC and Big Ten form its own alliance maybe, or secede from the NCAA. And that would cause them to be be in charge of how their conferences handle NIL, but also this stuff with, the transgender issue and such. If they were to leave the NCAA, they would be in charge of pretty much everything. Now, the only issue that comes of that is the NCAA still does determine who is the national champion in basketball. And this could hurt other sports like softball, baseball, track and field, swimming, and such. So maybe this can't be something that can be done across all sports as of now, but college football definitely can. The SEC, Big Ten, maybe the ACC, the Pac-2 or Pac-12, how many teams are in the Pac-12 as of now? Maybe they can leave and determine things for their own. The only issue with that is, though, if the SEC determines that men can't compete in women's sports, which I would think it would, maybe the Pac-12, who is in a very liberal part of the nation, determines something different if they secede from the NCAA as well. That's why this federal law, Tommy Tuberville's bill, if it is passed and it becomes federal law across the United States, then that issue would be no longer. So hopefully Tommy Tuberville's bill, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, can get passed and become federal law, and then maybe we could see the NCAA become meaningless. Or you know what? What's even better is if the NCAA changes its law, the quote changing of its rule. I laugh because it's humorous that they say that this was them complying with Trump's executive order when it wasn't. You're still allowing them to access all the facilities. You're still allowing transgenders to access all the facilities of women, practice with them, and still hurt them. Although transgender men can't compete technically against women in the NCAA, they're still able to access all the facilities to practice with them. And then there's that major loophole of the birth certificate. So, you know what? If the NCAA said no men accessing women's facilities, period, and then also we're going to, put some cheek swabbing or something to determine your reproductive hormones, your reproductive biology, and check your chromosomes, and then determine if you're an actual male so that you can compete in women's sports, that would be more preferable. I don't want the NCAA to go bye-bye. I want the NCAA to stop being a bureaucratic organization that does nothing but get in the way. It's behind the eight ball on everything. And I would have liked for it to reform and become an effective organization and spearhead issues, not only the transgender issue, but also NIL and other issues. Instead of being behind the eight ball, get out in front, be a leader, and be an effective organization, because you got kids that you preside over. So they count on you to not only protect them, but to also do what's best for them and for their future. But when you're a woke, ideological organization, a bureaucracy like the NCAA is, then you do nothing but get in the way and kowtow to liberal ideologies because you're weak. And Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, does not have a spine, and therefore this is what you get. You get nonsense like this. And I don't care if you try to claim that there's only 10 transgender men competing in women's sports. That's 10 too many. And if you don't get out in front of this right now, you're going to set a precedent, and this is going to become an issue for a long, long time. So please, the NCAA, make some changes and actually become an effective organization instead of a bureaucracy. And if that calls for Charlie Baker to leave, then whatever we need to do to get that to happen, let's do it. And I don't know who that would be to determine who the president of the NCAA is, if they need to take a vote on it or such. But all I know is Charlie Baker is not being an effective leader. He's not doing anything but sitting there and cowardly letting things get out of hand without making a affirmative decision on anything. So the NCAA needs to change right now before the team or conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten leave and you become meaningless as a whole. Because if you don't change, that's what's going to happen. I mean, look, we have Michigan and their cheating scandal. We haven't had a ruling on that yet, and it's coming up on 2 years since that's happened. I believe 3 years, actually, and a national championship for Michigan under the belt. So any ruling that they do make on it, it's going to be meaningless because it's going to be so far past, the incident that it's not going to mean anything. We have Twitter and we have Netflix with this documentary on the cheating scandal and Connor Stallions. All that's already happened. So everybody already knows all the details just from doing their own research and going on Twitter and going on message boards. And the evidence is already there on the internet. I already know who did what on Michigan, and I already know all the cheating that took place. But yet the NCAA doesn't, evidently, and they've yet to make a ruling on it and make any punishments. I mean, shoot, Jim Harbaugh is already in the NFL, so he's not going to be affected by this at all. So that is just another example of the bureaucratic nonsense that takes place in the NCAA. They are ineffective. They are slow. They're cowards. And it goes from transgenders to NIL to rulings on cheating scandals all across the board, all across the spectrum. The NCAA is a joke. So all that being said, the NCAA, with its new, quote, change of policy on transgenders and women's sports, really does nothing. And actually, I want to show you this video from Riley Gaines and her organization that she put out to call out the NCAA and their, for show, policy change. Here it is.
We see you, NCAA.
We see you, NCAA.
We see you.
You announced a new policy after Trump's executive order.
This policy does not protect females.
It sets no clear boundary.
This policy does nothing
To ensure women's sports
Are for women only.
You said you were going to comply with federal law.
But you didn't.
Your policy is based on a birth certificate.
That's the proof required.
But it's no proof of sex.
A birth certificate is a piece of paper.
which can be altered in all but 6 states.
And around the world.
And they can be wrong.
In 44 states, a person can change their birth certificate to say female.
And your policy still allows males on women's teams and in their locker rooms.
We see you, Charlie Baker.
We see you, Charlie Baker.
We see you, NCAA.
We see you.
We've been spit on.
We've been yelled at.
Called terrible names.
We've been shot at.
You tried to silence us.
But we are not going away.
Young athletes are depending on us.
They're depending on you.
And if you won't stand up for female athletes,
We will.
We demand fair sports.
We deserve safe sports.
We aren't backing down.
NCAA women's teams
Are for female athletes only.
That means those born female.
XX only. No substitutes.
Let's hope Coach Tuberville's Protect Women and Girls in Sports Act gets passed this week and we see the NCAA make some changes to its policy. But if they don't, then we will just see another example that the NCAA is a cowardly, spineless, bureaucratic, useless organization that very well could be on its last leg moving forward. Did I put it bluntly enough? Did I express my dislike for the NCAA enough? Because I hope I did. And, I hope there's change in the future for the NCAA because it could be saved, but it needs to get some actual leaders in charge for there to be any sort of change with the NCAA. Well, there it is, folks. That is this episode of Out of Right Field with JP. I appreciate you guys tuning in. And until next week, when another episode comes out, please follow me on X, like I said, in the description below. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, appreciate you guys tuning in.